People used to treat me like I was nothing, a shadow in a room full of glossy, pretentious lights. The Langford Conservatory's charity recital was a fortress of elitism, and I, a blind black teen with a heart full of melodies and memories, stood at the edge, clutching my cane like it was a lifeline. Hearing live music again, after losing my parents, sparked a mixture of anticipation and anxiety within me. When the world-class pianist Vincent Langford took notice of me, I felt smaller than ever. His condescending smirk stung. I wanted to vanish into the dark recesses of the concert hall. "Why don't you play something simple?" he sneered, exposing the contempt cloaked in his cultured demeanor. But then I remembered my parents, their laughter, and their music echoing through my mind. And I realized I had a choice, to cower or to rise. "Schizophrene Bach," I asserted, the words hanging in the air like a striking chord. Suddenly, this was not just about music. It was about dismantling the stereotypes that clung to me. As he played a technically perfect but hollow rendition of the piece, I felt my heartbeat guide me. Neglected, and I tapped into the depth of my grief and rage. Each note poured out like a release, resonating with the audience's silent disbelief. It was raw, it was real, and finally, they could see me. The applause that followed was not just for the music, but for a triumph over the invisible weights that had held me down for too long. In the end, I left with an acceptance letter from Juilliard, while Langford's arrogance led him to teach at a community center, his fall from grace proving that brilliance often lies in authenticity, not status. I emerged from that night, no longer a shadow, but a beacon for those too often overlooked. Defiance chandeliers flickered above the audience, casting shadows over the polished wood of the Langford Conservatory stage. Vincent Langford, a world-class pianist with an ego to match, leaned forward with that patronizing smile that made the room feel smaller. "Hey there, young man," he called out, voice dripping with condescension. "Why don't you give us a little something? I hear you play, well, if that's not too much for you." The audience chuckled, some outright sneering. The blind black teen shifted uncomfortably, his fingers trembling against the cool surface of his cane. "Actually, I prefer Bach," he managed to say, his voice steadying as his heart pounded. Langford's laugh echoed mockingly through the hall. "Bach, huh? Do you even know what he sounds like, or are you just another kid hoping to impress?" "More than you," the protagonist shot back, surprising himself with the conviction in his words. "You started in D major, but the partita is in C minor." Dard, replaced by tense murmurs. The maestro's face paled, but he recovered quickly. "Well, let's see how you handle the piece, then." As Langford played, every note was flawless, yet hollow. The room felt suffocating. When the teen stepped forward, he took a breath deep enough to anchor the storm brewing inside him. With each key he pressed, he poured out grief and rage. Notes flowed like tears spilled onto the keys. The audience held its breath, captivated, as he transformed suffering into sound. Margaret Rothschild gasped softly, and even Dr. Hallbridge, skeptical until then, leaned forward, entranced. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then a wave of applause surged through the hall like a tide. Behind him, Langford stood, a faded echo of his former self, the veneer of superiority stripped away. The Langford Conservatory's charity recital buzzed with an electrifying tension, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and whispered applause. In a sea of elegantly dressed attendees, a blind black teen sat, his heart pounding in tune with the anticipation. After years of silence since losing his parents, hearing live music felt like a fragile flame flickering in a storm. But then came the maestro, Vincent Langford, his condescension dripping like honey. When he turned his gaze towards the protagonist, a ripple of laughter followed, scraping at the edges of the teen's spirit. Langford's voice, mocking yet smooth, invited him to play a simple tune. As the condescending jeers floated around him, anger simmered beneath the surface. "Actually," he responded, voice steadier than before, "I prefer Bach." The atmosphere shifted. Langford's attempt to undermine him only fueled his fire. "You started in D major, the partitas in C minor," a murmur cascaded through the audience, disbelief punctuating the moment. In their eyes, the protagonist was transforming from a target of ridicule into a figure of defiance. When the moment to play came, he closed his eyes, drawing from a well of grief and rage. The notes poured out, raw and unfiltered, each chord embodying his sorrow and strength. Silence fell before the catharsis erupted. Margaret Rothschild, usually so poised, covered her mouth, and Dr. Halbridge gripped his chair. Suddenly, the room was alive with realization. The protagonist had turned humiliation into an undeniable moment of mastery, while Langford's polished facade crumbled beneath the weight of authenticity. The atmosphere in the grand hall pulsed with tension as Vincent Langford leaned closer, an insidious smirk framing his face. "Why don't you play something simple, something for a child?" His laughter echoed, but Quentin felt a flicker of defiance spark within him. "Actually, I prefer Bach," he replied, each word deliberate, his voice steady as he recalled the wisdom in the composer's complexity. The moment brought whispers of disbelief from the audience. Battling the nausea coiling in his stomach, he remembered the nights spent poring over sonatas, losing himself in the harmonies that spoke of both sorrow and strength. "Do you even understand music theory?" Langford jeered, attempting to belittle him further. "Your grasp is but a facade," Quentin interrupted, heart racing as he stood taller. "You started in D major, but the piece is rooted in C minor." Gasps filled the room, a small victory reverberating through him. The audience shifted, intrigue piercing through the condescension. Quentin took a deep breath, the weight of grief transforming into resolve. As he sat at the piano, Langford's smirk evaporated. The notes flowed from his fingertips, imbued with every loss he had faced. Raw emotion washed over the hall, the simple reverberations of pain, rage, and survival stripped bare. The silence that followed his final note was electric, charged with newfound respect. "I can't believe what I just heard," Dr. Halbridge murmured, her face reflecting both shock and wonder. As applause erupted, Quentin felt the stirrings of validation. He had found his voice amidst cacophony, reclaiming the power that had long been withheld. The respect he claimed today was just the beginning. A transformative moment he would carry into every future note, into every step toward Juilliard. As the final notes of Langford's hollow performance hung in the air, a suffocating silence fell over the Langford Conservatory. The audience, once enamored by the prestigious maestro, shifted uneasily in their seats, an invisible tension crackling between them. The blind black teen stood off to the side, heart pounding, his fingers trembling at his sides. "Actually, I prefer Bach," he had said, a quiet confidence masking the storm within. Now, with the piano lights casting an ethereal glow, he felt the weight of history and loss pressing against his chest. He took a deep breath, grounding himself. This was his moment, not for revenge, but for validation. As he approached the keys, the room held its collective breath, a palpable anticipation hanging thick. The protagonist's fingers danced over the chords, weaving a tapestry of sound that filled the hall with haunting beauty. Each note exuded not just technical prowess, but an emotional depth that resonated with the souls present. He poured his pain into the music, the heartache of loss, the longing for family, the struggles of being disregarded. The eyes of Margaret Rothschild and Dr. Halbridge, their expressions shifting from surprise to awe. As he reached the climax of the piece, the audience felt the music coil around them, lifting them, liberating them. A soft murmur began, hushed but growing, like the awakening of a long-dormant belief in the power of true artistry. Battleground Langford stood to one side, his once cocky demeanor unraveling with each note played by the teen. The applause erupted suddenly, raw and unrestrained, a tide of emotion washing over the triumphant protagonist. While Langford's carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing his insecurity beneath. Later, as the awards were handed out, the protagonist's acceptance into Juilliard was met with a standing ovation. He looked to Langford, now a mere shadow in this brilliant light, teaching at a community center, stripped of his self-importance. A silent triumph washed over him, no need for revenge, as the universe had already balanced the scales. With a deep exhale, he let the music fade into his memory, understanding that authenticity had triumphed over arrogance, and that the true measure of a musician lay in their ability to evoke real connection. Blazing in the dim light of the Langford Conservatory, I can still hear the echoes of that fateful evening. A blind black teen, I was filled with both trepidation and anticipation, ready to explore the depths of music for the first time since losing my parents. Yet in the midst of highbrow laughter and condescension, I was met with a challenge from Vincent Langford, a figure cloaked in arrogance. As I grappled with his dismissive tone, my heart raced, caught between the urge to retreat and the necessity to stand my ground. When I played, every note became a bridge between my pain and the audience. I poured years of sorrow and strength into that singular performance, evoking something raw and unfiltered that Langford could never replicate. Looking back, I realized that strength isn't just about triumph. It's about transforming hurt into a voice that resonates. Do you think I went too far? Have you ever faced someone who underestimated you? I invite you to share your experiences, reflect with me, and weigh in on the complexities of power and justice. Let's celebrate resilience together.